the topic of sport broadcast rights has been a very hot one over the recent years, with especially broadcast authorities or broadcast organizations advancing different arguments with regards to who is able to buy broadcast rights for different sporting events. One side being the free-to-air channels, saying certain things are free-to-air and should be broadcast for the entire nation to see. The other side, pay television, says we are able to buy these rights from different federations who appreciate the income that comes from there. So we're talking about that this morning, and to help make sense of it all, I'm joined by ICASA's Palesa Kadi this morning here on the AM Report. Palesa, good morning and thank you so much for your time. Perhaps first of all, explain to us the new new regulations that ICASA has published with regards to the sporting rights or sports TV rights and what they mean for the ordinary South African.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. Good morning to the listeners. This has been one comrades marathon that we ran at ICASA with all the sports-loving South Africans, listening, seeking a balancing act, but also ensuring that there is a leeway for access to sports for many South Africans. We've tapped on quite a few changes or amendments which sought to address some of the gaps that were seen, discussed over submissions and also public hearings. And these really include your indigenous games, your alternative dispute resolution mechanisms that are there, and add-ons to the sporting list of 21 listed sporting codes currently. So this is a moment for South Africans to celebrate, because all we need really now is some form of leisure, some form of transformation that will enable those who cannot afford to at least have access to national sports. And we take this as one avenue that the authority has delivered on.
You speak about maintaining some sort of balance and about those who cannot afford, but the regulations have sort of kept the broadcast rights exclusive to pay television channels. How does that work? Was the argument perhaps from the free-to-air channels not compelling enough?
They're not the same. I don't think it's correct to say we have not moved an inch. If you look at the list and what we have resolved on and decided on, we've added, for instance, Netball South Africa as a sporting code, and so on. So if we were to look into the list, there are some changes. But also the second part, in terms of contractual and also commercial agreements, there is subcontracting that is allowed, and that is why we've had most of the sports as South Africans through the free-to-air broadcast and our subscription television. So I really do not believe that we have not moved at all, and such that South Africans will be deprived of any sporting content, especially sports of national interest. And also, if we look into how we have dealt with the issue of soccer, football, how we have managed to balance as well the cups, the tournaments, the championships, I think it also requires that we look into it, we observe and see how this can be tested and implemented by all parties concerned, which is free-to-air and also subscription television.
But you speak again, Palesa, of national interest. I'll make an example here. The PSL, for instance, football in the country is of national interest. A lot or majority of South Africans would love to have football on free-to-air television. But at the moment, it's not. The PSL's rights are exclusive to SuperSport. And the PSL itself has always said this is where the bulk of their profit is made from selling television rights, broadcast rights. Was that in any way a contributing factor, the money part, the profit part by the PSL? Did they make that argument or advance it in any way? And which ultimately, to be honest, disadvantages people who can only watch on the SABC.
PSL is a private entity. It's a commercial entity, a commercial wing that strives to really find ways of distributing soccer, football content throughout. I'm saying this as a consumer of sport, but also with what we have observed over time. What we have seen is that South Africans were never deprived of soccer in football in particular through the PSL. But what we regulate is the free-to-air. We regulate the SABC, not the PSL. So we need to differentiate between the two. And when we go back to the list and we see how then we have managed to club or cluster some of the championships, the cups that also come through the PSL needs to be taken into consideration. Also, as we look into this, I think, Benjamin, when we view how soccer or football is in South Africa versus other sports, and how they have, throughout the difficult times through broadcasting, have managed to have ways of working with the free-to-air broadcaster, SABC in particular, in giving South Africans the football content required. I don't think this is the gap that we should be discussing, because it is not necessarily.
Sorry to come in there, Palesa, but essentially they're left to fight for the crumbs, because if the SABC sub-licenses from a channel like SuperSport, it means, and which is often the case, they are left with games that essentially lesser people would like to watch, because SuperSport, I wouldn't say they would hog or anything, but it's their right. They have bought those rights from SuperSport. They sub-license games that are of lesser interest to those who cannot afford pay television, and ICASA can regulate that. I know you don't, you can't tell the PSL what to do, but you have the power to regulate that.
We don't have the power to regulate the PSL. We need to separate these issues.
Not the PSL, yes. Palesa. You have the power over the broadcast free-to-air and pay television. Mm-hmm. You can sort of regulate how the distribution of television rights works, not the PSL. And this must be said, that we're just making an example of the PSL.
Oh, yes, I understand that part. But also, we need to be fair at how we are observing this process, because we've had matches where the subscription television will also share with free-to-air, with SABC. Some will be delayed, live, and so on. And South Africans kept on watching. We also have evidence that when matches are delayed or when there are repeats, there's still a huge number of audiences that seek to follow that content.
Surely, Palesa, you don't believe anybody wants to watch delayed live matches. I don't know why they call delayed live, but nobody wants to watch a match.
I mean, also the questions we should be all talking about is digital TV and online TV, because that is the reason why they would know some of the results, and they will be able to follow that. So what we're saying is that when you're creating the balance, you look at the commercial viability, the sustainability of decisions that we make, but also the feasibility, all in all, for all parties to continue with this. So there will be a point where everyone else will be able to bid for this, and they will be able to get what they require in terms of the sporting content, whether premium or not.
So
but what we should be saying to South Africans is that we have not left them out. We have provided an opportunity that they can be able to watch the content. Delayed live should at least be one consideration that we have looked into, because at some point we need to reconcile and look at the commercial viability of decisions that we make.
So it was essentially about the money for the federations. It was not about access for the poor South African. The argument that, look, paid television pays us a lot more money for these rights was that one that evidently won the case here, if I can call it that.
We should not be conveying a message that South Africans will not have content or access to sport. That is not the intention.
But they don't.
The tone
Palesa,
of this.
I'm sorry to say, but they don't have access. If you are too poor, basically you're too poor to watch sport, because you cannot afford the subscription fee to watch Super Sport the entire weekend. You are depending on the national broadcaster, and since they don't have the money to match, to buy those rights, they have to sub-license, and now they fight for the crumbs. That is the reality.
We are not putting a view out there that we are closing South Africans. South Africans will have access. I think we need to hear each other very well here, that with the delayed live still as an option, we need to say that at least there is no one who will be locked out. Remember, we've benchmarked this. We have been working overtime trying to seek a balance. And the regulator cannot wake up one day and cut off all possibilities and all constraints that are there. Let me make an example. In the UK, the subscription TV or the watching of national sports is done through free-to-air mainly. This is done in a manner that is considerate, because all members of the population who are interested in connecting into the broadcast, they pay TV licenses. And we understand the South African context, that not many people are still being driven towards paying for these licenses so that there can be sustainability. So when we look into this, we said no member of the population who wants to watch sports will not be allowed to. Yet there are these incentives or compromises that we have found, because we cannot find a reasonable state where we say all at the free to air, all sports should be at the free to. It's not sustainable.
Palesa Kadi, appreciate your time this morning. We'll continue to engage with you with regards to this very hot topic when it comes to sport broadcast rights. Delayed live is what you're going to have to settle for if you cannot afford pay television, and that's according to the Communications Authority of South Africa, ICASA, this morning. Let's leave it there.